Hello everyone who has joined us today. This is the Media Center Ukraine in Ukraine Forum, which is going on with its work, and I'm happy to welcome the presentation of our new project, Dialogues on the War. This is the project, 3 of 3 video conversations of a schoolgirl with the ex-combatants and veterans of the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian war. A bit about the format of this meeting. We have the broadcast both in Ukrainian and English. We have simultaneous interpretation, so if you've got a necessity, you could use our headsets. So now I'd like to welcome and to introduce you our participants. Those are Taras Shevchenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine on European integration. Oleksii Shkuratov, Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Closer to Taras. Roman Gladkovskyi, who is responsible for the organization of the project in the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. Hero of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zhemchugov. Hanna Baikenich, who is responsible for the implementation of this project at the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance. Volodymyr Tylishchak, who is a deputy head of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance. And Olha Tymoshenko, principal of school number 309. Hello, dear friends, and I would like to begin the presentation of the project with a video footage which has been prepared in advance. I would ask our technical team show the video reel. There is a cloud over our city, and I'm without an umbrella. Why do you need an umbrella? Well, because as there is the cloud, there will be rain. No, this is the cloud of war. And what will happen now? Yes, they will shoot. It will be scary, because the war is cruelty, violence, pain and tears. They kill people at war. So when did the war start? Do you remember the Revolution of Dignity? In spring of 2014, the president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, fled to Russian Federation, and from where he urged Russian Federation to restore his authorities in Ukraine. Everything began with the Crimea. Russo-Ukrainian war began with the annexation of this peninsula. The Crimea was our weakest link, because in the Crimea there were lots of Russians living and they had their military bases there. On the 1st of March 2014, the Federation Council provided Putin with a permit to use armed forces on the territory of Ukraine. So, Taras, I would ask you to begin and to tell a bit about this project, why it is necessary just now, because we do understand that these issues which were questions raised in these videos, what the war is, every Ukrainian and not only Ukrainian household is facing it when it's trying to choose the words explaining what the war is to their children. Please. Thank you and hello. Dialogues on war, as I'm sure, are really important as a project. and during these historical times we are living in, and unfortunately in the future. The children need to be explained about the war, and that is why the videos which were shot with the topic what the war is, why Russia is trying to take over Ukraine, what is the modern russo-Ukrainian war, those are the questions which are raised in the foundation of the upbringing of the younger generation of children. This is the footage which is done for the pupils and students of the 5th to 11th grades. And altogether, as for me, there can be lots of different shapes and opportunities within the curriculum of the schools where we can and we should speak about that. The patriotic upbringing of the children, and lots of different institutions are dealing with that, which are presented here as well, because you've named the present partners, the presentees, but not only them, not only our ministries of Education and Science and Culture and Information Policy, the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance, but also broader, the Ministry of Defense, of Youth and Sports are also involved, and they have their own part of state and public tasks which are also connected with the communication and upbringing of youth and children, and making the people aware about the truth, explaining what is really taking place. So those senses are embedded directly in the project of Dialogues on War. The form of the dialogues is also, as for me, very convenient and useful for explanation. The questions and the answers, descriptions, video footage, live, real stories, some of the precise and specific people and stories who have felt and overcome the first years of the war, and they are now protecting the state as well during the hardest times, at least during the last 31 years after the restoration of our independence. So I'd like to thank all of our partners, the initiators, everybody who has been involved, and especially I'd like to express my gratitude to all of the children, to teachers who are already practically using these materials, and I do hope they will do that in the future. Thank you. Oleksii, let us speak a bit how these materials are planned to be used, where they will be used, how. Whether it will be in the curriculum during the lessons, and how it will be done for the children. Hello, dear colleagues. In fact, how can I say? The main points of this project are already been implemented. And what's interesting about it, that this project has been done beforehand. Before the beginning of the armed aggression, we had this content already. This project has started earlier because the war is ongoing since 2014. Our children are already ready to the war psychologically, more or less at least. And this contact as of today is becoming more important and is implemented, is already taught in our schools. Some of the history teachers are using these materials in the lessons, in the academic year process, and also this content is used beyond schools, in the camps, including the Academy of Sciences during their classes, which are created for the scientific research. And I would like to mention that what's interesting about it is that today, under the conditions of war, and we know that during the last years there was the situation with COVID where we had remote training and online classes. Through these videos, it is easier for a child to perceive some of the materials than from the textbook. So I'd like to say that recently we have presented the project, and as of today it got acknowledgement as the record of Ukraine about online classes for the PTE teachers, where we involved 125 teachers, and almost 1,000 classes were taking place online. So in this presentation, I remembered an interesting point. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, during the first week after the beginning of this war, I have a habit with my daughter, when I have some spare time, to go to the playground and to deal with sports. So before the war, when I came out, the youth was never active at this playground. After the war, the patriotic songs sometimes are sung by groups of youth, taking into consideration that lots of children left together with their parents. And still, when I was watching these children who were going in for sports and singing patriotic songs, I understood that our country cannot be prevailed. Knowing that, I understood that when the person gets, then the child gets this experience, practical experience during the war, and when he or she should have gained this experience communicating with the teacher, it can provide us with a synergy effect. And then the child would easily perceive the issues which we observe in our state under the conditions of war. Roman, the question to you as to the person who is dealing with the implementation of this project. We have seen that now we are presenting 3 episodes of this project. Will there be any more episodes with this topic, and what they will be about? Hello everybody, all the presentees. First of all, I would like to mention that this project is an innovative one. First and foremost, as with the help of the real people, with the help of the real witnesses, because we shot the videos with the people who lived through these events, who know like no one else what the war was and what the combat and warfare is even before the beginning of the 24th February. This is the value of this material. And also it's really nice that in the working group, during the creation of these materials, we involved teachers, pedagogues and scientists, the academics, the representatives of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance, who chose the topics, selected the topics, because they are a bit of debatable in our society, both the views on the war and the children who, thanks to the conversations and communication with the teachers, and thanks to the real stories by the witnesses of these events, the children can make their own conclusions about this war, about the war as it is. And in my opinion, the value of that is because lots of parents are now at war. They are protecting our independence and freedom. So the conversations on that are not only in the families, in the households, but also in the educational institutions. That is where they are important. So the use of this footage, both during the history lessons of the 5th to 11th grades, and also in the upbringing events, and also beyond the schools, are really important. That is why the ideological component of this content is significant, because the Ukrainian people are invincible. And thanks to such people who are now protecting our country has the future. Going on with that, I'd like to mention that the working group has also developed the methodological recommendations for the teachers, how this subject should be taught. But also we have developed the content itself, how the school teachers, who will be speaking about that later, are teaching this content, how they're using this content in the educational process, both at the history lessons and at the other upbringing events. Because I think it's important to shape a conscious citizen of your country. This is one of the tasks of the educational institution. Thank you, Volodymyr. So maybe since the beginning of the full-scale aggression of Russians, since the 24th of February, our children already have understood what the war is. Unfortunately, they all have seen it with their own eyes. But now we are facing a really much more important challenge to explain to them why it took place, to deepen them into the historical context of this war, and what led to it, to explain to them in simple words, to choose the proper communication which would be definitely comprehensible for them. What was your approach to this content, and what's the most important in it for you? Hello, everyone. I would like even to look at this issue broader, in a broader sense, because in fact this project, which has been founded, the Dialogues on War, is important not only for the children, it's also important for the teachers and altogether for the grown-ups as well. So, because unfortunately, we got used, the older generations got used to tell about the war in the framework, in the templates, in the stereotypes formed by Russian propaganda. And then a huge ideological machine was working on that. They were trying to impose lots of approaches. And the upbringing was that the children should be transformed into expendables. So this stereotype, in fact, is still preserved. So today, one of the very important tasks for the whole society of ours is to get to know how to speak in a different way about the war. This project is a very good one and demonstrative one, an example how we should speak about the war in a different way. Because we can see what the preservation of the Soviet ideological narratives leads to. Looking at the aggressor country, at Russia, where this crazy cult of victory, the use of the children and transforming them into the expendables, just remember that video, that song, which the children sang, Uncle Vova, we are with you, about the last fight and so on. So it's obvious that we need to get to know how to see and to speak about the war as an evil. But this evil, which needs to be overcome, we need to prevail. So this project, and I'm really grateful for the initiative of this project to Mr. Volodymyr, who offered and proposed this idea, in fact. So we joined it and supported it. And Hanna was working on that as well. And Roman Kulik as well. You could see him in the video. That is our employee, and he was talking to a child. He's a veteran of war, and now he's at the front line again. So for us, it's a huge and important project, so we understand that this topic is really needed. We need to expand it. And including, if we speak about the historical aspects, it's obvious that today we all need to explain to the children what are the real reasons why the war started. And to understand that the empire character which the Russist regimen preaches is the reason that the war has become possible and a big war came to our land. The understanding and the knowledge of that could help our children to understand, to acknowledge, and to respond to the questions which emerge. And to conclude, I would like to express some expectations and hopes that rather soon, besides creating the dialogues on war, we will have the opportunity to create the project of dialogues on the Ukrainian victory. Definitely, Hanna. You definitely have something to add. Could you please tell about this project in more details? How long did it take you? And maybe any of the interesting points about the creation of those videos. Thank you for giving me the floor. Dear colleagues, hello all of you. I'm happy to greet you. Thank you for the invitation. So, of course, I will tell you, even in a broader sense than Volodymyr did, that our project is not only for the pupils of the 5th, 11th grades, not only for the teachers, but as the practice witnessed, the presentation, the preliminary presentation of this project shows that it is very relevant both for the museum employees and the servicemen, the soldiers. It's much broader than we could think. So let us as when Volodymyr came to the institute with his pain, with his idea that we need to do something, we need to create something, we couldn't help supporting him, both as public servants and just as human beings. It was not even discussed because we decided to be involved in different perspectives, both financial and informational, methodological. We have written the scenarios, the scripts. So what this project is about? As for me, the main idea, the main task of this project is first and foremost to shape the understanding of the child about the war. Not the knowledge, but the understanding. Because the knowledge is something more precise in comparison with the perception, and we don't have a right so far to speak about the knowledge on the war, or maybe about some different perspective in this project. So when we are speaking about the perception, this project is not then about the war, but about people, it's more about the heroic actions, and about civilians, about the rights and values. Those are the notions which in the script plan we tried to show, and I do hope we coped with that, to hope this thread which you could use getting to the notion of the war. Because just explaining what the war is, especially for the children of the 5th and 7th grade, it's very hard, it's very sensitive, and it's so important. Because as of now, me with my colleagues, I'm visiting lots of cities during the business trips, and we are presenting this project, these videos, in more than 15 cities of Ukraine for the teachers, education employees, the museum employees. We have presented it, and lots of people ask us the following: can we at least speak? Is it reasonable to speak with children about the events which are still not over? Because the war is not over so far. Well, undoubtedly, we all know that it will be over with our victory, but still. Is it okay to speak about it? And our answer is yes, it is totally reasonable, because first of all, children need to know. Well, maybe not know, because we do not use this notion of knowing, but just they should understand why the Russians attacked Ukrainians, who our enemy is. The children need to understand why it is so important for us to get victory. And the children need to understand how each of them, being a child, a pupil at the school, can help for the sake of the victory.
A bit more details. Now it's relevant to say what this project comprises of. The 3 video lessons with video dialogues with the pupil, with the student, with the military veteran of Russian-Ukrainian war. Those are not actors, those are actual veterans. Naturally, there are methodological recommendations, written recommendations, speaking of them, because to give teacher a tool with understanding what to say, and not to give teacher a tool how to speak, not proposing teachers possible mechanisms, coups and tools how to use those videos and lessons, we couldn't. So we elaborated this methodological recommendation to each video lesson. And indubitably a new component that added due to cooperation with the school, with the Kyiv school, that's video instructions, video guidelines, video samples, how we can demonstrate, how we can add and use those video materials on during the lessons. Therefore, I really appreciate all for attention and for inviting me here. If there are any questions, please. Ms. Olga, please share your experience. If in your school this project has started, what is the experience? What are the feedbacks and how that is happening? I remember the day when I had a phone call from Mr. Volodymyr, and he asked me if that would be interesting for me to work with those methodological recommendations regarding dialogues on war. And I remember that phrase when he said, just formally, if it's just formally, if you're not interested, just don't agree to it. If you're not interested, we won't continue the conversation. I said, it's very interesting for me, and I really expected that help. In 2014, I came from Crimea, and I was head of School 309, and 160 kids came with me from occupied territories. And those dialogues of war, they practically, we have them since the moment those children appeared in the school. And those dialogues, they're not so easy. Many teachers from occupied territories came as well. I remember parents approaching me and saying, please don't put this teacher in our class because we don't want her to transfer her pain on our Kyiv children. We don't want our children to speak of war. We don't want them to know about it. Maybe that's bitter truth, but it's the way it is, the way it was. And the issue of war and dialogues of war, and the child cannot forget where the child is from and what that child suffered. So it's a very delicate issue. It's important not to hurt a child, not to get the flashbacks that would lead to depressions or to psychological stress. And when this project appeared, Dialogues of War, I said, well, this is a huge help with methodologically checked by scientists, by historians, by museum people, specialists, that it's all very professionally built, and I really, really appreciated and needed that material. What we tried, well, actually, naturally, it didn't all work immediately. Should we work? Should we talk to people, to children about this? Could kids openly say in class where they suffered, because in front of their eyes, their grandfather was shot by occupants, or some of their classmates perished in the war? But it appears that children had need to talk about it, and the content of the project was built that it calls children to openly speak and frankly speak about it. And they want to say in one phrase or a couple of phrases that what's deep in their soul, and they have no one to talk to about it. Yes, so they don't tell it to classmates, and that's an opportunity. And when they spoke this out, it was really worth a lot. Naturally, we'll continue our work, and we will expect more help, of course. We hope that the new classes will be videoed, will be shot, and about the summaries and about the findings of the work, because we tried not only in the classes that we filmed, but we tried that content in many classes of school, so practical in all. We try to look how children react, of what age, and actually we signed under these methodological recommendations. We said that we are responsible for it. So we had to work through it in detail. Therefore, we conducted a lot of work, and the results, if you're saying that you saw a group of children that were singing and were doing sports, our children, since day one, in the shelters, in school, they were bringing water to elderly people and people who could not walk. They were taking care of those people. They had duties in those shelters, and they are on duty. So now, even in the shelters, they, like, instead of many of the personnel left, and I was mostly alone, and 500 people from the neighborhood that went to the shelter in school, and they had to be managed. They had to give them blankets and bring some couches or benches or something. And those kids, those children, they really helped. They're still in school. Therefore, I think this is the top result of the project, also including not only the project, but the project as well. Volodymyr, could you share with us how this initiative arose? And usually those initiatives, they they are done with the personal pain, and you felt this necessity for our children to properly explain and discuss with them those important moments. Thank you. I will cover history a bit, I'll touch history a bit, the idea of creating this project. In 2018, I joined the Ministry of Information Policy, and I was dealing with the projects of national patriotical education in higher education institutions. Since 2018 until pandemia, we went through over 60 higher education institutions around Ukraine, and we created the Ministry of projects like captives of Kremlin, how the war started, and when we went through the country, when I came to university, I got to know the director of the university, and I asked to introduce to the teachers, and I always asked teachers, can I look at the plan of the educational work? Can I look on a Facebook page or in your site of the university, the last events on that topic. And pretty often, there were problems with teachers. They said, we lack methodological information or literature or information to create contemporary, good, patriotic materials and topics. And I asked and said, no, there's internet available at fourth years of war, and maybe you can find something in Google. And they were saying, well, they have a problem with that. When they just upload something from Google, sometimes and oftentimes materials, they have a map of Ukraine without Crimea or without Donbass, so they have materials where video content is used or text from Russian Chechen war for some reason. Or they use topics of so-called Second World War, and directors were telling me of the higher education institutions, especially in the east and south, in Kherson region. Regretfully, there were cases that we know that there are pro-Russian citizens as well, and some of them are teachers, and it happens, they were using in their materials such words as Civil War 2014 or illegal coup, and that inspired me to make informational materials that would assist not only the teachers that are trying to do something to receive useful and checked information to teach that to children, but also to provide methodological literature to the teachers in the east of Ukraine. In some regional centers, departments of information policy and education, they addressed us, can we conduct those lectures in professional technical institutions and schools? And there were several schools where we conducted those lectures, and always teacher is telling me, I'm sorry, but we lack this methodological literature. Just provide us with methodological materials. If we have methodological materials just stuck in my mind. Methodological materials, and it will follow. Therefore, my idea was to create this methodological materials, checked materials, that it would be agreed with the Institute of National Remembrance, with the Institute of Quality of Education, and we started this work. I was very happy that after creating this new Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, my project was supported, and we started operations and started working on it. And as you know, we have hybrid war, and it was very important. It was proved by the Institute of National Remembrance that in hybrid war, not generals on the battlefield won, but teachers of history and teachers that raise patriotism, they win. This is the war done like this. And we do this work together with the Institute of National Remembrance, and I'm very happy. I really appreciate that that approach was done to children, that to make them interested. We did that with kind help of production, Forepost. We did those that content for each class, and I'm happy we found a girl that played that role of a girl, an actress. And I saw when we presented those classes, when children were quiet in class, when they saw a girl and what questions she asks, and what reply she gets, it was very interesting for them. That was a very useful tool in our program. Children more react to the same children as them. And after the presentation of the pilot project in School 309, we filmed additionally with the help of production, and on the basis of Dovzhenko movie studio, made a 45-minute movie to assist teachers, for them to see how it was done in Kyiv and how to do that in Donetsk region, maybe in Kherson region, in Mykolaiv region, in Lviv region. Having and seeing that experience and elaborations of teachers from Kyiv. And what's really important as well, that we, in that material, film 45-minute material, and how teachers teach in school, how they promote patriotism in the schools, and how Ukrainian teachers tell children about war. It's very important to watch that in different countries, in Russia, in Belarus, in Kazakhstan, in Europe, today, because today, in that informational war, this has really helped us to differentiate Russian propaganda, that our teachers don't teach fascism or Nazism in schools. They just talk to children. And of those examples, starting from 5th grade psychology, why boys cannot find common ground in class, why they start fighting, what is war, starting from Greek mythology, why children thought that over 300 years this war was ongoing. Russia had different governments, but the war is still a war between Russia and Ukraine. Now, actually, this war started in 2014. And teachers in different countries and propagandists for Russia, for them to be able to see that we have normal education. Nobody teaches fascism or Nazism. And there is no propaganda. Our teachers tell the truth. And that truth is even better than propaganda. That's in a nutshell. Oleksii, maybe a question to you. In 10 days, our children will start classes. We're going classes. And the question will be raised about, very important, how teachers will tell them about this war. What they will be told and how. Are there those guidelines available for teachers, and how it is for us Ukrainians to understand that the teachers will convey the same thought that is expressed in those guidelines? How to avoid some teachers to promote their personal position that is neither the position of the government nor of the Ukrainians. Probably I will start. Well, the thing is that each teacher has to teach their material, preparing for the class, and those methodological recommendations, they're of recommendation origin. They are merely recommendations, and teachers, they pick which content to present to the class. Neither ministry nor the school principal can impact that. However, if you're saying that the fact of the history, some teachers can interpret different way, in some cases even be biased. On the other hand, propagating, as they say, the Russian world from the standpoint of the start of war. But naturally, we will detect those facts, we will study those, we will discuss, and sometimes there will be even criminal cases will be opened. But to make those methodological recommendations as include that in the study plan, we will conduct this pilot. Probably you will continue this project after the fact of full-scale invasion. Probably those videos will expand, and we'll continue implementation. And after that, I am convinced less than a year will be needed for our teachers to try these materials, and then we'll look from the standpoint of including that into the study program. So it's about helping those who want to provide this material, but it lacks the approaches and guidelines that our colleagues help to elaborate. Trust, maybe you can add something. On the methodological part, that's for the Ministry of Education. Well, actually, I repeat that Institute of National Remembrance, since 2020, disseminates some parts of this project without video guidelines. Just recently, they were aired. We addressed the Institute of Modernization under the Ministry of Education that provided a approval letter to those video materials, to the methodological part. And also we addressed the Ministry of the Education of Ukraine, and those materials were also disseminated with letters among educational institutions of Ukraine. So I think adding those video guidelines, we can move on and we can update that with the departments, for the corresponding departments.
And I will add a bit as well. If we are speaking about the methodological recommendations, the most important is the tasks which we all face is to study, to train children how to use critical thinking. If we form critical thinking, the person with critical thinking will not become a victim of propaganda. So it's obvious that the teachers have an opportunity, and the Institute provides you with the materials, the Ministry of Education and Science provides you with the materials which are created first and foremost for the Ukrainian children, Ukrainian students and pupils to shape this critical thinking. And those dialogues are also the component of this process. Thank you. Dear colleagues, maybe you've got any questions which you would like to pose, so please, could you take your mic? Hello, Yulia Bakumova, Ukrinform. I did not understand, in fact, those lessons and classes, though you say that those lessons are just having some of the videos which are recommended for use. And maybe you should say that they should be used during the special hours for upbringing, then for the history lessons, or is it done just for the future? I did not understand that. And one more question to clarify. Do you have the plan to involve the children in this project who are now abroad and who are going on with their studies there? Thank you for the question. Look, first and foremost, this is the series of video reels which can be used in the educational process, both at the classes and also beyond the school and upbringing events. During the history lesson, when you study the topic of russo-Ukrainian war, you can broadly use this notions using these videos, because you know that our education process is not just verbal. Not everything is done in the textbook and by teachers. We are in the 21st century, so unfortunately COVID and the war taught us to use different forms of training, both online training and mixed types of training. So thanks to these kinds of projects, the use of materials of these projects will give an opportunity to the teachers during the upbringing events to conduct some of the lectures with some topic, focusing attention for the children who are, for instance, temporarily displaced. And also these videos can be used during the studies of the topic of Russo-Ukrainian war at the history lesson, at the civilian education and training in the 11th grade, when those civilian competences are being sharpened, at the humanitarian law subject, the subject of protection and defense of Ukraine, when we are talking about what the war is, what are the rules of war and customs of war, and why they are being violated. And these materials will let you understand this or that topic much better, and also to have some of the upbringing events which would shape a patriot, a citizen, the protector of your own motherland. Thank you. Let me also add a bit. Yes, you've mentioned a question, and I will answer in more details. These materials are used just for the not for the curriculum beyond the school. Unfortunately, in the state curriculum of education, these topics are written just for the 11th grade at the classes of protection and defense of Ukraine. All of that is done beyond the school mostly. I personally believe that the law drafts which are now under consideration in the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine, will give more opportunities. And the national patriotic upbringing will be embedded into the state curriculum. But we have used some of the trial lessons, and so far we are offering it for the events and classes beyond the school. As for the children abroad, well, children abroad can watch just the content. As the methodological information, we have developed several scenarios how the teachers can plan these classes. We've provided several spheres and directions of work, and the teacher himself or herself, after reading these methodological information, can plan the lesson himself or herself. And abroad, the children can get to know about these videos, or to watch this 45-minute film about all of the 3 lessons, and to see how it was organized in school number 309, how it was used by the teacher, and how the children responded with their own emotions. That's very interesting, how the representatives of production chose to show it. They focused on emotions. There were both positive emotions and, unfortunately, in the 11th grade, what really touched my soul, it took place that there were children from Donetsk there, and they were reacting very personally onto the tools which were used by the teacher. That was just touching me to tears. Yes, I can add, if you allow me. Really, as it was already mentioned, beyond the curriculum and the school, there can be some of the events. There were some of the precedents of the use of these materials as well. But what I mean, now we update the curriculum on history, in particular history of Ukraine, the integrated course, and our working group has already done it, and you can find those updated curriculum on the website of the ministry. And we have the expanded topic, the last topic of the Russo-Ukrainian war. So could you please tell what interferes in the process for the teacher to use these materials during the teaching process? Moreover, it's also written in the recommendations we were mentioning above. That is, within how you can use those videos. The second question is about the Ukrainian schools abroad, or Ukrainian Sunday schools, for instance. I doubt that the Ministry of Education would mind that we can impact the sense of what is taught. But in fact, we have conducted some of the events, and these materials were disseminated and presented among the Sunday schools in Prague, Amsterdam, Paris. So in fact, this is just when people come to us, they know our product, and we are happily involved. We are speaking about the novelties. This is how we are disseminating these materials among the Ukrainians abroad. Olga, I'm sure that you're already getting ready to the 1st of September, to the first lessons and classes. Which pieces of advice do your colleagues get from you as a principal about the first classes? I'm sure that they will be speaking about what is taking place, especially during the last half of the year, let alone 8 years of the war. What are your recommendations? How we could begin and start those first lessons? You should give a hug to every single person who came to us. 64 children came from the occupied territory. In fact, in each of the form and class, there are some children like that. Just the children who are telling how, for instance, their classmate died. They're just speaking plainly about that, how their classmate's dad was buried in the yard. The children who came to my office are just telling about that. The mothers are crying, but the children do not. Childhood is a very special time, and what they've seen now and what they've heard about will stay with them forever. So our task is to speak a lot, and we do that about the patriotic upbringing and the national upbringing. Yes, and all of that will be that. But the first thing what we'll do on the 1st of September, we'll give a hug to those children. This is the best recommendation ever, and I would really like all the teachers to hear you and to begin this academic year with this for our children whose fate unfortunately faced so many sufferings. Maybe there are any other questions left here? No questions left. I would like to express my gratitude to all of the participants of the presentation of this incredibly important project for our children, for the teachers, and for all of us, the grown-ups. I thank you for this project. I thank our esteemed colleagues that you are interested in these stories. Thank you and stay with us.